because the conversation I'm going to have now is with a very interesting pair of people. One of them went and got some two young gentlemen who decided to invent this little device, and they said, we think this little device can change the world. And they said, I probably believe you. And guess what happens? That ended up being the BlackBerry. So we're very honored to have someone like that. And this other person we're going to have with us is someone who is about to help someone bring up the next BlackBerry, except this time from Nairobi. And with all that out of the way, Mike Volker, I want to begin with you with regard to that nice little BlackBerry story and research in motion back in Canada. How that came into place and sort of the lessons you can learn, because from what I know, which is very little about how research in motion began, it's two guys with an idea and they say, we think this innovation can actually go off and become a successful thing in the market. How does that happen? What sort of things do you look for?
Well, Wallace, very interestingly, research in motion didn't start with the BlackBerry. In fact, the company started in 1984.
Oh.
And it wasn't until at least a decade later.
See how little I know.
Yeah, there you go. So I had my own business, which I sold, and I started doing so-called angel investing. So Mike Lazaridis, who started RIM, Research in Motion, he called me up and he said, hey, Mike, have you got a few dollars that you can help me? I'm a budding entrepreneur. So I went and visited him, and he had a tiny little office, a couple of guys working away. And the name Research in Motion came from the fact that they were doing contract research for other companies.
I see.
So, for example, General Motors had engaged them to do a little factory floor automation system, and they were busy doing that. So they were really doing consulting work, if you will. And over the years, of course, that led to the BlackBerry. But when I saw them, I was interested in investing in them because I saw that entrepreneurial spark, because it really comes down.
So was it the idea of the person?
It was the person. They had no ideas, right? They had nothing. They were bright guys doing work for other companies. So they were really brilliant engineers, if you will, acting as consultants for other companies that needed their talents. But I sensed a spark of energy, a spark of enthusiasm and entrepreneurship, and that's what attracted me to the company when I first met them.
Kamau, is that sort of, if you was to put it very bluntly, that sort of fairy story, that lovely story of someone saying, I have this advice, it's not even the idea that's important, it's the person behind the idea, and you'll get someone with a fair bit of capital coming and saying, yes, I'm willing to support. Is that even possible in Kenya?
It is, and it's already happened. I mean, there's the example of Seven Seas, for example,
yeah, exactly,
Mike Macharia. And in that case, you have somebody, Gashui, who saw something in Mike and was able to support him to build his business. And I think even though we don't have the depth of experience that they've got, say, in Canada and other countries, I can see this definitely happening more and more in Kenya. I can see, because I'm a lecturer at the university, and I'm every day dealing with students with wonderful ideas. We've got a platform now, which we call the Fab Lab, which allows people to express that talent by making things. And it's fairly sophisticated. And so I see a fair bit of innovation coming out, but a lot of very high intelligence and curiosity. And so I think it's just a matter of time, so long as we create that environment.
That gap, though, of idea, person to money. In fact, if I forget about the money part, less the money part, but more the successful company or the successful execution of the idea. That's usually what's not there. So you look at all these people who develop these wonderful ideas in their minds. They develop wonderful projects, even sometimes even wonderful products. But from there until the point where you have a company that, one, outlasts this person, not necessarily in terms of longevity, but even in terms of the guy comes in and says, I'm going to run this for 5 years, and then get out and the company will outlast him. Apple, we just talked about it just now.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem to happen too often.
I guess not. And I mean, basically, what everyone's trying to do around the world is to create an environment to make it happen. Because very rarely do you find someone, like in Mike's case, for example, he had a product which went to market, and he started it as a university student and then managed to do all that's necessary, because getting to the marketplace is quite different from the kind of skill set you need to come up with a good idea in a technical idea. So it's usually the case that a person who has a very good technical idea might not know much about business. So what we're doing at universities like University of Nairobi, other universities in Kenya and so on, is to try to create this environment that will assist you. So you come in with your good idea, you know what you want to do, we help you to hone it, we help you to be able to do the proof of concept, to write a business plan, and then to pitch it to people like Mike, who's an angel investor. We have equivalents here, although we haven't yet matured that sector enough, but it's growing. and then trying to help you to sort of protect the intellectual property where necessary. So to do everything that's necessary, which is what incubation is, to get you into the marketplace. And then when you're mature enough, you can move out into an industrial park or something. But the other thing is that you're together with many other people. So this environment is so important because a lot of other things can develop. So whatever you might be thinking in the beginning might not really be what your big success will be in.
Mike, I'll ask you a sort of flip question. Is sort of where do the good ideas come from? Is how do you get rid of not necessarily bad ideas, but sort of the peripheral ideas where you end up with this purity? And let me tell you why I'm asking that, because Steve Jobs' biography, the one that came out the other day, I remember reading it, and one of the things that came out of it is a very powerful thing, which is what Jobs used to do was chip away at bad ideas. And he has got a million things coming to him to put, and he says, no, let's keep on getting rid of stuff until you're left with a certain purity of form. So the iPad, for instance, has one button, that sort of thing. So when it comes to ideas, and you've probably seen 1,000 in your day, how do you turn them away, or how do you refine them to such a place where you end up with the one purity of idea that can actually go to market?
Yeah, that's a really tough question. But I think it's really not about the idea. It's about the individuals behind the idea and how they're approaching the market. Like, take Jobs as an example. I mean, he decided what consumers wanted, and then he pushed it out to market, and through design and innovation, he was able to get his products accepted. But he was ruthless and he was relentless. You know, he was a tough boss to work for.
I've called him names on Facebook. People don't like me.
There you go. You know, and not many people have that drive. And drive is one of the key entrepreneurial characteristics that I look for. A lot of people give up when success is just around the corner.
How do you tell that drive? Because I'd imagine, and I've seen people, I've even been there myself, where you have the drive because it's your idea. You woke up in the middle of the night and said, Eureka, this is what can actually make my fortune, and this is what can change the world.
It may be a bad idea, though.
It may be a bad idea, but that's the point. That's exactly the point. That if I come to you and I turn it away, then I give up. Now, how do you tell that stage before the person actually gives up the idea?
Well, you know, their commitment, the level of intensity that they have. But, you know, a good entrepreneur will take feedback into account. Maybe not always from investors, but from the market. And what I often say to students is just start. You know, just get started. So many people think of reasons why not to begin.
I don't have money, I don't have this.
Yeah, I don't have this, I don't have that, I don't have any business experience. And sometimes naivety is a good thing. You know, when you look at all of these guys like Gates and Jobs, Richard Branson, Mike Lazaridis, none of them had any business experience when they started, and they were all university dropouts. Yes. So they didn't even have a lot of technical experience.
Don't say that loudly because you're sitting next to me.
Yeah. Sorry. Recognizing the importance of that.
So I say to them, get started, get into business. And the same thing happened to me. You know, we thought we had a great product that we developed when we were students. But it's the very first customer that we wanted to sell the product to said, yeah, you know, it looks really good, but it doesn't have this feature or this characteristic. So if you're committed and nimble and quick, you'll run off back to the laboratory, make those changes, and come back for another run at it. And if you do that, you'll eventually, you know, your customers will drive you. Your customers will help you define the direction.
How does this environment support that sort of thinking? And you can look at it from all sorts of different ways. Number one, if you graduate today, there was a graduate from University of Nairobi, and you go off and tell your parents, I do not want to, I've been offered a job by Safaricom as technical this or that, and I said, no, I don't want to join Safaricom. Or even worse, you tell them I'm going to drop out of university. And then you go off, or else you say, I'm establishing company X, and it may take me 10 years to be successful. We don't have that patience here in Kenya.
You're right. It's very rare, and the traditional or conventional wisdom in our culture is play it safe. And I think it's all around the world, you know, but some countries will probably have more of an entrepreneurial spirit than others. It's usually when you really have next to nothing to lose that you'll take big risks. But if you're on that track, you're at university, you're getting a degree, everybody around you will tell you, no, you finish your degree first, then you might think about, in fact, go into a safe job, and then
don't tell you about it, I know.
You've been through
but
that.
The question then is, how do you, I don't know, it's not even a question. It's more or less a thought bubble.
Yeah, what in my mind and my experience, I'm seeing that examples are what change the world. So like the examples you've already been talking about, Steve Jobs and so on, who didn't even finish but have changed the world. We're seeing a couple of examples. Let me move a little bit away from tech, but here at home, Binyavanga Wainaina. Yes. So he goes to university, and I think at some point in his second year, he told the lecturer, look, I want to publish. I've been writing, I want to publish. And he had a rude answer, and I hope I'm being faithful to the story, but something to the effect that, how do you think you can publish when you're just a second year at university? So he quits university, ends up entering his publication to a prize for the Kane Prize. He wins the prize, and then he sets up his publishing house called Kwani. You know the story. Yes. So Kwani
became a cook at some point, by the way.
Probably, yeah. So it's a difficult path, but these are the trailblazers, the people who will open it up and allow other people. Now, I'm a lecturer, and my business is to produce people who are graduating. So I don't want to be necessarily saying that don't think about your degree. It's important to get an education. But there is time, in fact, we, University of Nairobi, are collaborating with Simon Fraser University, where Mike actually works in the process of converting ideas into businesses. We learned from them that if it's recognized a second year student, for example, has a very good idea whose time is now, the market will not wait for him or her to graduate. Yes. Then they'd advise to pursue it if you want to. Pursue it now, we'll support you. It may be that you'll come back to finish your degree later. But, you know, it's quite an interesting question.
Speaking about universities and education and everything, can innovation be taught?
Definitely. Oh, for sure.
Can you take just someone and say, fine, young man, young woman, come, we shall teach you how to innovate?
Oh, yes. Oh, there are a lot of formal programs. I mean, there's, you know, the creative mind at play, but in terms of innovating to the extent of commercializing, I think commercialization is the key buzzword these days. That does take some discipline, and that is something that can be taught. Even on the innovation side, like design and form, function, those things are all, it's possible to teach those, definitely. And
in terms of the skill set Kamau was talking about, because one of the things that you find in this whole conversation is exactly what he said, which is the fact that the mindset, the skill set, the entire makeup of an innovator or an inventor, whatever you want to call them, may not be the same one that would run a business. Sometimes people even say that to have a successful business person, middle manager type, you're a very boring person. You know, you work 9 to 5, you make the trains run on time. Whereas this guy is a guy who wants to not have us being trains, he wants to have us fly around with magic shoes. That sort of mindset. Now, how do you balance these two? Because you'll have the innovator being very impatient and saying, you cannot see what I'm talking about, and this guy will say, you need to pay your people next month.
Right. Well, I'm sure you've heard that saying where the successful entrepreneur said, well, you know, I don't really know much about business, but I have a lot of smart business people working for me, right? So there's some truth in that. But I think a good entrepreneur will surround himself with the people to build a successful business. A key thing, I believe, in entrepreneurship is knowing what your own weaknesses are, right? Identifying those weaknesses. There are the guys that I'm afraid of, and the ones that I avoid investing in, are those that think they know absolutely everything. That's a danger. You know, here I am, I've been doing this now for practically 40 years, and every day that goes by when I see students at Kamau's lab and I talk to them, I realize I know less and less. So when someone comes across as knowing more and more, it makes me very, very nervous. And so what I look for is people who are like sponges, who absorb information, who accept coaching. They don't necessarily follow everything blindly, but they're open, they're receptive, they take ideas, they take input, and they use that to their advantage.
Kamau, speaking of angel investors, again, this whole thing of taking innovations from the innovator's mind to success. In Kenya, there's the accusation that, number one, we're very short term in terms of our thinking. Then there's a more legitimate complaint that there's very few paths to market. Yes, I'll come in and invest $1 million shillings in a good idea. I'll never get that money back because I can't go onto the stock exchange of that company. It's the stock exchange sort of very closed up. Selling it on a secondary market is not very possible in this environment. And that may be what is keeping these angel investors away. Now, how do you bridge that gap?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to learn from the people who have already done it. So, you know, Canada, USA, and so on. I think that what we're doing currently is we're seeing a couple of good examples. The one I mentioned, like 7 Seas and so on, where an angel investor has put money in. Their money is still tied in there, but they're getting their dividend, you know, every so often. They have an equity stake, and that in itself is not that bad. But I know that the Capital Markets Authority is looking very seriously at this problem because they came to our lab, amongst others, to sort of look and see what's the innovation space in Kenya about right now. There's so much hype around, especially ICT.
Yes.
What people don't know historically is that biotechnology has probably been much bigger in this country than ICT. In terms of, the number of seeds that have been specifically designed for our climate and so on, and that has a huge impact, and even health and so on. But I think we are really moving towards a place, and it's exciting to be in Kenya at this point right now. We're moving to a point where these structures are going to be developed more and more. So I think having Mike here, for example, and we had a breakfast yesterday where a lot of potential angel investors were invited. There was a lot of excitement. And I think so long as we put in the right structures so that you and I, if we're investing, our exposure is limited. So the risk is shared amongst a larger group of people. And then there's all that due diligence, the kind of thing that Mike was talking about, not just looking at the numbers, but the nature or the character of the person who is the innovator. And are they a know-it-all, or are they ready to learn, and so on. So I think we're at a point where we're probably going to see a takeoff here in Kenya. That's my own opinion.
Here's a strange question, though, and it's that accusation has been thrown back and forth, and I've been one of the ones who's throwing it. Are we overemphasizing the element of entrepreneurship in our economy, which, if you think back even to the government, where they come up with the Youth Enterprise Fund and the Women's Enterprise Fund, where we seem to think the answer out of poverty or the answer out of slow growth is not necessarily innovation, but entrepreneurship. But not everyone can be an entrepreneur. Some people are middle managers, and they'll be very good middle managers. Are we overemphasizing that?
It's a bit difficult to sort of decide. Imagine you're a policymaker, and how are you going to encourage those who could be innovators and who could be very good at it? Definitely not the whole population, but you have to encourage people. So the system is going to whittle out those who can actually make it and those who can't. But I think there's probably, and some people have spoken of, like, if you can get 15% of the youth in a country to think a certain way, you'll change the entire country. There's going to be a number of people who come forward, and we're seeing them in our lab. We're seeing some, I can point at maybe 3-4 really exceptional young people who have already done a lot of things against a lot of all the odds that are in this society right now, this the business space, who are making it. So I think you really do need to try and get the culture to be very entrepreneurial. Already many people are, but I think that's an important way to do it. And as I say, the market will sort out those who can make it and who can't.
Mike, you're nodding very vigorously when I was asking that question about whether you can have too many entrepreneurs or too many budding entrepreneurs.
A lot of people think they're entrepreneurs, and we encourage them to be entrepreneurs, but in fact they're not. They're not, they just don't have certain attributes that it takes. I like to think of the 3 I's: immediacy, integrity, and what's the other one? Immediacy, integrity,
innovation,
and intensity. Intensity.
I was waiting for you to say that, because I was waiting to hear intelligence, and that doesn't appear.
I think it's covered in one of the others, right? Because I think just about anything else you can lump into those. So there are a lot of people who give up. They just can't take it. And I've seen this in spades. People say they're entrepreneurs, but they don't work 24 hours a day.
Yes.
They need to have their sleep. They need to have their lunch. Or, there are those that like to put something off till tomorrow if you can do it today. And when you think about it in business, what's the big threat? It's competition. So if you're working on something and you put it off, someone's going to eat your lunch and get there before you do.
Yeah.
So I think there's a sort of a natural Darwinian kind of process of elimination. And we do see many, many companies fail because the people behind them think they're entrepreneurs, but really they're not. They just don't have that spark that it takes and that staying power. Yeah.
It's hard because we're about to wind up. In fact, I probably can't even get time to ask any more questions. But just very quickly, when you say this is the best time to be in Kenya, what will it look like 5 years from now? Will it be pure ICT? Will it be biotech? Where will it be?
It'll be a mixture. Biotech, definitely. ICT, energy will be in the mix as well. Materials and minerals, not many people are aware of. We know that there's a lot of skill in control and automation, robotics, and actually those are the 5 thematic areas that we work around. And I think that because of the kind of attention Kenya is getting, we're going to see a lot of money pouring in because there's opportunity, and even money from within coming and backing. So long as these structures are set up, which I'm seeing happening, I think we're going to see a big change.
Very quickly, Mike, you've been around, for the last more than 24 hours, so at least you've seen 1 or 2 things, including the Fab Lab.
Yes, quite a bit.
What does it look like to you, looking at it from the outsider's perspective, in terms of the energy levels and all that? Don't say the nice things just because you're here and Kamau sitting next to you. What have you seen?
Well, if you want me to be honest, I have to say I'm very impressed with what I've seen. I see a high degree of enthusiasm. I see a vibrancy here, and I'm personally excited about what I see. You know, I see a lot of the same things here that I see in Canada. There is this, and again, to be very honest with you, there's sometimes this perception that, oh, Africa is lagging and things are behind in Kenya. But I don't see that. I don't see that. I see bigger gaps and bigger spread between rich and poor. But sort of at this stage of entrepreneurial development and innovation, I see a lot of the same things here that I see right back home.
Right.
And I think there's a real resource here that if it's properly tapped with investment, with angel investors, I think this can be a real engine of economic development here in Kenya, and I'm very excited about it.
Good. That is a lovely note to leave it at. I was waiting for him to say something nasty. And tell you why I was waiting for him to say something nasty. Because he made him take his tie off. He was wearing a tie, and both of us were not in tie, so we thought, no, take your tie off. So the tie is somewhere down here. I won't show it to you. It's a very nice silk